Part 16. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 151. Chapter 151 Training Class, New Magic, Bats, B Ultrasound. Big win. Big win. The Magic Council is victorious. Not only did they achieve a complete victory in the separate battlefields, destroying the squadron of the Lord of Glory Church and bulldozing the coalition forces in Midland County, but they also successfully defeated the rebels in the main battlefield, in the royal capital, with the coalition of Magic Council and local nobles. Imprisoned the false king who had just ascended the throne. But these have nothing to do with Gretel. He hurriedly met with his teacher, the bald bishop, and the others, and explained that he was going to the Magic Council headquarters for further training, and was carried onto the airship by Archmage Carlyle. He has been absent from school for 3 months. Why don't you go to the headquarters for class as soon as possible? What kind of trouble do you want to cause? Gretel was thrown into the training class in a daze. The large room of 70 or 80 people was filled to the brim with teenagers and girls, more people than in the junior high school in Gretel's previous life. Seeing Gretel being let in, everyone looked at him with suspicion. Who is this, come so late? 2 rows back in the middle of the classroom, a blond boy glanced back and quietly whispered to his seatmate. The girl sitting with him also glanced at Gretel, turned her head and looked straight ahead. Only the pearl earrings swayed slightly on her beautiful earlobes. I don't know, but he's dressed very rustically. He doesn't look like the child of some master. Maybe he's a student? How else could he get in? My cousin didn't even get a spot, behind the girl. The other girl lay down forward and whispered. Immediately someone interrupted across the aisle. Yes, it is said that each county only has 1 quota, age, level, and research results. It is difficult. God knows whose work was stolen and stuffed in. Greed. I said, do you really think I can't hear you? He pretended not to hear anything. Among the students in the classroom, the older ones are less than 20 years old, and the younger ones have not yet fully grown up. They are almost a group of students from the 2nd grade to the 3rd grade to the 1st year of high school. It's the time when young people don't know what it's like to be sad, and young geniuses are selected from various places. It's absolutely impossible for them not to gossip. If you argue with a group of children, wouldn't that mean you're getting better and better? Greed selectively ignored that he was only 16 years old, a little younger than the median age of this group of people. He craned his neck and looked toward the podium. The Magic Council spent a lot of money this time, and the magicians who gave them lectures were all great magicians of level 10 or above. Greed has not heard whether the lecture is profound and simple, at least that level. As soon as the first class started, Greed's eyes were dazzled by the gold thread on the corner of the teacher's robe. Level 11. He looks to be only about 40 years old, and his movements are nimble and nimble. He is not someone who relies on his rank as a magician to delay aging and is just pretending to be young. A high-spirited, young, and promising grade 11. In the previous life, this was equivalent to asking a group of top professors to give lectures to the students in the junior class of Hust, right? He secretly sighed. The teacher stood on the podium with a smile, without textbooks or chalk, and placed a small box on the podium. The sound of metal collision inside was clear and sweet. Greed sat up straight and looked around. The teacher waved his hand casually, and large pieces of text and pictures condensed into the air line by line. Today we will talk about Harsh Scream. This is a level 1 sonic spell, which is the basis of the plastic energy sonic spell. Please note that it does not belong to the same category as the level 0 phantom sound. The principle it's not the same either, so don't apply it when learning. 2 spell models appeared in the air at the right time. The black model lines and red lines specifically circle the key nodes. Any magician with eyes can see at a glance that these 2 magics are indeed very different and cannot be applied at all. Magic tricks are magic tricks again, but compared to Master Lawrence using magic tricks to draw tables on the wall during the assessment in the magic tower, this void painting is much more beautiful. Gretel sighed secretly, and lowered his head together with the classmates in front of him, copying. The series of shrill scream goes all the way up, including level 2 crushing sound wave, level 3 disturbing noise, level 4 roar, all the way to the highest level banshee's wail. Usually, we can use no casting materials and just rely on the spell model to produce piercing scream. He paused and opened his mouth. Students in a classroom hurriedly set up various defenses, including shield spells, mage armors, and simply brushing themselves increased resistance. After everyone finished defending, the teacher took a breath, and a sharp whistle pierced through instantly. "Hey guys, is this comparable to the sound of dolphins?" Greed's face twisted on the spot. On the left front and right front, the faces of other students were also distorted so that they could not be seen, and they completely lost their initial demeanor of handsome men and beauties. The teacher smiled and said, "Theoretically, a magician can use all his mental energy that day to cast piercing scream. In fact, no one does this. Do you know why?" "Why?" Greed pursed her lips silently. The teacher saw his movements at a glance and pointed a finger, and a big bright yellow mark fell on his head. "This gentleman in the last row, please answer." Gretel subconsciously wanted to raise his head. "Teacher, what you are poking at my head is not an exclamation mark, is it? Or is it a question mark? Did you mark me as an NPC?" He tried to concentrate, stood up and answered. Although the sonic attack of piercing scream is amplified by magic, it is basically the scream of the magician himself. Such high-frequency sounds are very harmful to the vocal cords. Looking around, he saw that the students were all confused, so he immediately changed his words, "It hurts the throat very much. So, if you are not more confident in your own healing skills, it is better to control the number of spells you cast, or to always have healing drugs on hand. Don't forget to do this once a day, 5 times, 8 times, 10 times a day, sir. Even if your vocal cords are not torn, they are at least edematous, right? So which magician came up with the idea of howling directly from the throat? Don't you have a flute, a whistle, or at least a tuning fork?" At the front of the classroom, the magician lecturing opened the box and raised the short metal fork. There was a low exclamation. Greed pretended to copy the teacher's lecture notes and quickly scribbled on his notebook, "Harsh scream can use tuning forks as casting materials. There should be a correlation between the sound wave frequency and the length of the tuning fork. If you want to emit infrasound or ultrasonic waves, you need to find other methods material." The magician waited patiently for a moment for the students to finish copying their notes. He rummaged around in the box for a while and pulled out a piece of parchment. In addition to causing damage, sonic magic can also be used in many situations. In the latest issue of General Arcanist Monthly, Little Bat Flight Experiment explores the application of sound waves in the field of magic exploration, and thus the new magic created is a very good example. The magician talked non-stop and spoke highly of the research ideas of this paper, the process of controlled experiments, the principles of magic, the application prospects of using high-frequency echolocation to explore the environment, etc. Gretel was sitting in the last row of the classroom, with only one word echoing in her heart. "Be ultrasound. Be ultrasound." Thanks to @Copper Alchemist for the reward of 500 starting coins. Thanks to @Screws for the 100 starting coins reward. The title of the paper mentioned in this chapter, discussing the application of sound waves in the field of magical exploration from Little Bat Flight Experiments, is a tribute to Chapter 6 of Castle in the Sky, the third part of Arcane Throne. But don't worry, I'm just mentioning it here, I will come up with my own tricks later. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, please collect, please recommend. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 152. Chapter 152 Luoyang Bat Gui, do you want to die? The teacher actually asked us to study bats. I don't want it, it's dirty. You're stupid. I've seen the reviews of that echo magic, it's groundbreaking, but limited by the strength of the creator, there are quite a few areas for improvement. There's no easier way to score points than this kind of magic. And he's an apprentice. Super magic is just right for us to study. After dinner, go buy a bat. Let's go together. Let's go together. The boys and girls walked out in twos and threes, talking about the research topics left by the great magician. Gretel was walking slowly behind, and when he heard that half of the 70 or 80 people planned to get bats, he couldn't help but shed a cold sweat. After finishing this sonic-related course, the great magician left a topic for everyone, to improve the echo detection magic, or to explore their own unique magic by referring to the ideas of the bat flight experiment. As soon as the words were spoken, cries of mourning arose. The courses in the training class are either loose or tight. There is one big class every day, and the rest of the time you spend the rest of the time reading, doing experiments, and doing research. For 10 days, each of the 8 schools had a day off, with the remaining 2 days off, and on the 11th day, they started all over again. There is a small test every month to assess the growth of mental power and the progress of learning magic. There is a major test every quarter to assess the students' magic research results. Although you don't have to do all the questions left by the great magicians after class, and it is indeed impossible to do them, everyone who has done research knows how valuable it is in scientific research to have a mentor who can point out the direction of your topic selection. It is still a direction with low threshold, rich ideas, and in line with current hot topics. Just this one, as a tutor, you can already be the corresponding author. The students rushed forward swarmingly. Gretel also wanted to start ultrasound-related research, but when he searched and inquired all the way, and touched the Magic Materials Center in the college, the salesman regretfully told him, "Sorry, the bats are out of stock." All of them are gone. Gretel was shocked. His classmates are also very good at shopping for goods, however, maybe bats are a niche spellcasting material and the center does not have many stocks. He thanked the clerk and went out to inquire. Their training class is located at Bridge Magic Academy, just at the foot of the mountain from the headquarters of the Magic Council, and the surrounding area is very bustling. Gretel walked less than 500 meters out of school when he found a small shop specializing in magic materials. When I entered, someone happened to be asking about the price of the bat. Bat? A living one costs 5 gold coins, and a dead one costs 1 gold coin. The big ones are the same as the small ones. 5 gold coins, Gretel was shocked. He does still have some savings, the gifts given by others when he opened the hospital, the allowance he received after the war, the private room that the teacher packed in before coming to the Magic Council, little bits and pieces, adding up to more than 100 gold coins. It looks like a lot of money, but if you use it to buy a bat, it will be gone in just one swipe. This does not include the cost of purchasing other experimental equipment and experimental animals. Researching magic is expensive, really. What? 5 gold coins, the magician who asked the price jumped. Are you kidding me? It was only 1 silver coin last month. Would you like to buy it? The clerk urged impatiently, there are only 12 left. Why are they selling so fast? Hey, you see, the bats here are all different sizes. They are not the same type at all. They are not very easy to use, can they be cheaper? There have been so many people asking for it lately, and they are all sold out, the clerk answered very skillfully. It was obvious that he had been asked countless times these days, do you want to buy it or not? The magician hesitated for a while, but finally paid the bill and covered all the inventory of the store. Greed had no choice but to go out and ask another family, and the answer he got was, an ordinary black bat costs 5 gold coins each, a flying fox costs 10 gold coins, a fruit bat costs 8 gold coins, and a vampire bat costs 25 gold coins. How much does it cost? Gretel cannot afford. When asked about the third store, the clerk replied pleasantly. The boss has gone to purchase the goods. If you want, pay a deposit and leave a batch for you. Then, when will the next batch of goods arrive? Gretel stood on tiptoes and glanced at the large cabinet behind the clerk. The product cabinet in the material center was made very similar to the traditional Chinese medicine cabinet he had seen in his previous life. It was a tall cabinet with drawers labeled with the names of the materials. Each drawer is not big, 7 or 8 inches wide and 3 or 4 inches high. When Greet first opened it, he saw that it was actually divided into at least 2 compartments. You can imagine how much one drawer can hold. Arrival time? That's hard to say. The clerk leaned against the counter and crossed his arms over his chest. There was not a lot of traffic at the moment, so there was nothing to do. Gret asked questions with a gentle smile, and he was also happy to talk about some gossip. This thing was not used much at first. I sold at most 10 pieces a month. Recently, many people are buying it. Not to mention my place, every small shop in the city has been wiped out. It is said that there are already the adventurer went to catch bats in the mountains. So, how many bats have been sold on the market these days? Gretel already had a bad feeling. He glanced at the inner room and found no trace of the boss, so he put a finger on the counter and pushed a silver coin over without making a sound. The clerk glanced at him and answered quietly, still shaking his head. It's hard to say. Our store is average, with about 200 to 300 stores. On this street alone, there are at least 3 stores larger than ours. As for places like the Academy, the Parliament headquarters. He raised his head and thought for a moment, then hissed and sucked his teeth. Hard to say. The ominous premonition in Gretel's heart became more and more serious. 200 to 300 in one store, thousands in 4 stores, plus the Academy, the Magic Council, etc., it might be doubled. How many people are tossing bats? With so many magicians, how many innovative ways will they come up with to torment bats? This thing is full of viruses. I have read information in my previous life and found that bats carry more than 4,100 types of viruses, including more than 500 types of coronaviruses. Is it because Ebola is not terrible enough in killing people? Or is SARS less powerful? Or maybe Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS, doesn't exist. Even the less famous Marburg virus, Nipah virus, Hendra virus, hantavirus, 1 or 2, are not so easy to deal with. It was better to live peacefully in peacetime, but now it was lively, with dozens or even hundreds of magicians swarming to study the bats. There are no latex gloves, no protective masks, no protective glasses, no positive pressure protective clothing, and no P4 laboratory that can effectively isolate the virus. No experience, no protection, and still want to study living bodies. If one of them is unlucky and spreads from person to person, the plague can sweep across the Parliament headquarters. Greet inhaled deeply and exhaled deeply. When I heard the content of the paper in class, my excitement about studying B ultrasound had completely faded away, and I was filled with uneasiness. What can be done to stop this trend of studying bats and eliminate possible risks of infectious diseases? Haha, has anyone thought of turning in this direction? Happy. Please subscribe, please give me a monthly ticket, please give me a recommendation vote, please give me a book review. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 153. How can we eliminate the risk of infectious diseases? Greet spread out pen and paper in front of his desk. The Magic Council treated them quite well, and a dormitory was specially vacated at the Bridge College at the foot of the headquarters to house them as advanced students. Even though Gretel arrived late, he was assigned a separate single room with a bathroom, bed, bookcase, wardrobe, and all kinds of furniture. Although it was half the size of the suite provided in the Magic Tower, it was still enough for Greet. Gretel was able to start writing the paper in peace. On the pure white paper, the quill pen drew the writing line by line. Although it is not as easy to use as the ballpoint pen, it can make do in this era. Gretel went through the stage of copying books on inferior thick paper and expressed satisfaction with the current writing conditions. On the possibility and preventive measures of disease caused by close contact with bats. Keywords: bats, disease, infection, virus host. Greet's pen tip paused. Bats carry more than 4,100 types of viruses, which makes them the source of many diseases, with outbreaks occurring from time to time. However, without a high-power microscope, I want to prove this point. Well, this is a serious challenge. Gretel put down his quill, held his chin with his right hand, and unconsciously traced his mandible with his thumb. God knows he is in the clinical medical field, not in the research field. Even for those researchers, you let them do research when they have nothing, and even bats can't afford it? 10 out of 10 will be furious. Gretel put down his pen and looked around. There are quite a few tools around him, including alcohol lamps, flasks, crucibles, test tubes. A complete set of simple alchemy equipment is lying safely. 2 large bottles of high-concentration alcohol squatted nearby, looking calm and harmless. The microscope is in the box next to it, and I haven't had time to take it out yet. The surgical instruments were in another box, tightly wrapped, not unpacked, not sterilized. When he went to the battlefield before, he packed up most of the hospital with the momentum of moving. It was fortunate that this was the case, otherwise the Magic Council's airship would have taken him in a circle to pick up his luggage. Gretel was confident that it would definitely not happen. However, these alchemy equipment certainly cannot help him complete the experiment. Gretel thought about the P4 laboratory he saw in the news, and then looked at the alchemy equipment in front of him that could not even match the middle school chemistry laboratory, and silently made a cross in his heart. Greet began to look through another small box. The monopearl is useless, the cold and heat resistance ring is useless, the corpse explosion ring is useless, mu-Xin is useless. Confirmed, all the magic equipment currently owned cannot help at all. Gretel turned out the teacher's letter expressionlessly. After thinking for a while, he took out his paper on bacteria and dysentery, used magic to make a copy, stuffed it into his pocket, and walked out of the college quickly. Bernard, Bernard. The single room in the college is only big enough for Gretel to live alone. Of course, it was not impossible for the barbarian to build a floor, but Gretel didn't want him to live in an uncomfortable situation, nor did he want to cram a 2-meter-tall giant into a limited space. Therefore, the barbarian was temporarily placed in the hotel, and Greet planned to go out for a walk when he had free time after class and find a house to rent. But now, Bernard, come with me to Oak Ridge, and we'll find the teacher's friends for help. At the foot of Oak Ridge, Elderwood of the Order of the God of Nature was struggling. Over the past few days, he has treated several adventurers one after another, suffering from fever, headache, muscle pain, and vomiting. It doesn't seem like much at first glance. It's normal for you to fall ill a few times if you catch a cold or have a bad stomach after going into the mountains. But if you ask more carefully, you will find that they have all gone into the mountains to capture bats recently or within the month. Don't mess with the bats. This is an ancient motto of the sect, which has been passed down for a long time. It is unclear why. This thing lies around day and night, looks ugly, and tastes bad. There really aren't many people around to catch it. But in recent months, the Magic Council has launched a trend of catching bats. and now a patient who was sent to him could not breathe after suffering from fever and sore throat. What? Are there guests? From Newster County, Elder Wood waved to the students impatiently. First arrange a place for him to stay temporarily. After I cure this patient, I will come and talk to him. But the house of the Order of the God of Nature is just like that. Gretel handed over Elder Irwin's letter with his front foot, and his back foot was already let in, standing far to the side. Elder Wood was treating patients, and he stretched his neck beside him. The patient's breathing was obviously faster than that of ordinary people, his nose flapped rapidly, and his lips were cyanotic. Greet counted silently beside him. Even if the breathing rate was less than 30 times/min, without a watch, he was not sure, it was at least 27 to 28 times/min. Is this enough to cause respiratory distress? Elder Wood raised his oak staff and murmured a prayer. A rain of light fell, and the patient seemed to be getting better, trying hard to cough up a lot of thick phlegm. However, not long after the treatment stopped, he soon became out of breath again. Interesting. What is the principle of this treatment? Improve the ability of the alveoli to exchange oxygen? Or directly increase blood oxygen saturation? Gretel quickly thought about it. Seeing that the elder's second healing technique was finished and could only be maintained but could not be improved, he took a step forward. This patient has a lung problem. He needs to be given oxygen. Suck, what? Next to Elder Wood, a level 5 priest and an apprentice looked sideways at the same time. Gretel took out a small tube of oxygen from his pocket and held it in front of him. There is a part of the air that is the gas needed for people to breathe, and it is also the gas necessary for flame burning. Human vitality and the vitality of flames are maintained by it. If there is too much of this gas, the power of flame burning will become multiplying. Look. He took out a twig, lit it, and tossed it until only sparks remained. Lifting the test tube upside down, the barbarian pulled out a dagger and flattened the mouth of the tube. Gretel quickly inserted the branch into the test tube. The blazing flames that erupted at that moment illuminated the eyes of the three priests at the same time. Fire is like this, and so are people. This patient is out of breath. Ordinary air is not enough for him, so he has to breathe this pure gas. Is that so? The worshippers of the God of Nature are doubtful. The room was quiet for a while, except for the patient's rapid breathing and a sound like a bellows. Elder Wood suddenly stretched out his hand. Child, show me this tube in your hand. Greet quickly touched a new test tube and handed it over. Elder Wood held the smooth wall of the test tube and looked left, right, up, and down, but couldn't figure out what was going on. Finally, I had to ask Greet. Child, is the gas in this tube what you said is pure and can maintain the vitality of the human body? Yes. Will it be useful if the patient inhales it? It's useful, but very little. You need a lot of this gas. It's best to cover it with a mask and let the patient breathe directly, or insert a tube directly into the lungs. Ventilator. Oxygen pipeline. It's best to get an oxygen tank. What's the use of such a small test tube? Elder Wood frowned in thought. Holding the small test tube in his left hand, he suddenly raised his right hand and pointed the tip of the oak stick at the patient. Then give it a try. The green leaves on the head of the staff swayed gently, and a translucent bubble was generated out of thin air, surrounding the patient's head. It was the bubble technique that Greet had learned. It can be used by level 1 mages and level 1 priests. The senior priest in front of me is naturally more comfortable in using it. I pray that the same gas that maintains the vitality of the human body as in this glass tube will fill the bubble so that the patient can inhale it effortlessly. Gretel was stunned. Instead of using potassium permanganate for heating or high-pressure separation, just use magic to gather pure oxygen? Boss, are you sure what you gathered is really pure oxygen? Not mixed with anything else? Isn't it mixed with some carbon monoxide or something? What is the principle behind this? Regardless, this strange magic did work. During the bubble technique, or the bubble used as an oxygen mask, the patient's complexion gradually calmed down and the cyanosis of the lips began to subside. Oxygen and all that really work. Thanks to @Baxiaoshen147 for the reward of 500 starting coins. Thanks to @Yamengbing for the 473 starting coins. Thank you for getting up today and don't give me 100 starting coins to cheer you up. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 154. With the support of pure oxygen, the tug of war between treatment and disease finally broke the balance. Elder would maintain the pure oxygen, bubble technique, and the level 5 priest next to him chanted several healing techniques in succession, successfully suppressing the patient's symptoms. End the treatment and send the patient away. When Elderwood looked at Greet, the temperature had suddenly risen by 60 degrees Celsius. If before, it was, "Oh, my old friend and disciple, I came from a faraway place with warm water of about 40 degrees, just right for the mouth." Then after Greet showed his hand, it instantly rose to 100 degrees Celsius, and it was like a gurgling sound. Can start bubbling. That is to say, Elderwood has a good-natured nature. The kind little old man stared at the glass tube in his hand, his eyes wishing he could take out his hand and hold the gas in the glass tube between his fingertips to take a closer look. However, after staring at it for several times, he still looked away and handed the glass tube directly back. "Thank you." "Well, you are Gretel Nordmark, Erwin's disciple." Greet quickly handed over the letter. Elderwood looked at it carefully, page by page, surprised and laughing. "Being a priest and a magician again? To curb the plague, you delayed the training of the Magic Council? And you also followed him to the battlefield? Not bad, Erwin has taken on a good apprentice." He looked at Gretel with an increasingly cordial look. "Your teacher has been a good friend of mine for many years, and he asked me to continue teaching you magic. From now on, when you are with me, it will be like being by your teacher's side. If you don't understand anything, just ask. If there is anything missing, you need help, just open your mouth. I have something to ask the elders for help." Gretel was eager to say this, and immediately hit the snake and followed it with a stick. "I was in the college today, and the teacher assigned a research project." He told what happened today exactly. Elderwood listened with a smile at first, but halfway through, his face turned serious. After Greet finished talking about his guesses and worries, he frowned and glanced at the door, and the kind smile disappeared from his fat, round face. "What you said does make sense. In the past few days, I have also treated several patients who went into the mountains to catch bats. So, I will write a letter now to remind my acquaintances in the parliament." "It would be best if the elder would write a letter." Gretel breathed a brief sigh of relief. "But I think it is still necessary to prove that these diseases are related to bats, or at least prove that it is very likely to get sick if you are with bats. Otherwise, I am worried that I will not be able to convince the magicians, and they will think that there are other reasons for the adventurer's illness." Elderwood pondered. As he thought, he twisted his beard unconsciously. The black and white beard is curled on the index finger, one strand after another, getting tighter and tighter. Greet was frightened when he saw it, and he was afraid that his beard would be ripped off directly. Fortunately, Elderwood was also familiar with this movement. He circled it clockwise 7 or 8 times. Seeing that the root of the beard was stretched to the limit, he started to circle it counterclockwise again. After going back and forth for 3 or 5 times, he finally raised his head and asked Gretel directly. "What's your plan?" "I have some plans, but I can't do it alone." I need help. Gretel already had a plan before setting off, and he refined and expanded it several times along the way. At this time, he was talking freely without even stumbling. As he spoke, he secretly sighed. If he had been so eloquent when he applied for the project, he might have followed the research path. My plan is divided into two parts. The first is to study the current patients and ask the elders to contact nearby healers to check the patient's condition. Among those who have been in close contact with bats recently, if we can find a group of patients with similar conditions, it can be preliminarily determined that bats can cause disease. In particular, if adventurers who go into the mountains to catch bats, shopkeepers and clerks who sell bats, and magicians who study bats all have similar cases, the evidence will be more obvious. Elderwood nodded slightly. He let go of the beard that had been torn into twists and blew on his fingers, and sure enough, a white beard blew off. The old man looked at his fingertips with regret, then raised his head, with a calm and reliable look on his face. That makes sense. If you don't know the local healer, I'll contact him. Where's the second part? Do experiments. Greed finally said the key point of asking for help. My plan is to find some live bats, all kinds of bats, and keep them with healthy animals to see if those animals will get sick. I need to choose several kinds of animals: rabbits, sheep, horses, pigs, and monkeys. That's the best. And, since we don't know how bats make people sick, it is recommended to find some more animals and let them come into contact with bat saliva, urine, feces, or be bitten by blood-sucking bats. Gretel spoke for several minutes. Under Elderwood's increasingly surprised gaze, he smiled sheepishly and finally ended his speech. The number of bats on the market now costs 5 gold coins, I can't afford them, and I don't have a place to raise them. I can't afford to buy so many animals, and I don't have the manpower to take care of them, so. He spread his hands and looked at Elderwood with eager and pleading eyes. His meaning was very clear. It's up to you. Elderwood coiled his beard again. He walked from east to west, then from west to east, measured the width of the room twice, and suddenly turned around. The diseases those adventurers got may have nothing to do with bats. Yes. I know, Gretel answered calmly. Elderwood nodded. If you have to catch so many animals and get so many bats out for research, there may be no results in the end. The possibility is very high. Gretel agreed with him. There is a high probability that no results will be obtained. The god of nature's financial resources are limited, and the experimental animals used are probably wrong. Or the disease is directly transmitted from bats to humans, without any animals as intermediate hosts. Or, maybe it's just unlucky and there is no probability of infection, or no signs of animal disease are observed. Gretel's eyes were too clear and too peaceful. Elderwood couldn't help but look at him a second time before asking the third question. It's possible that after those magicians finish tossing the bats, no one will get sick in the end. That's the best case scenario. Gretel didn't hesitate. I wish that no one in the world would be sick, and I would rather put medicine on the shelf to produce dust. If no one gets sick from bats in the end, he will be happy even if he goes through all the trouble in vain and is laughed at. Elderwood looked at him deeply again. Then, the little old man changed the oak stick to his left hand, stretched out his right palm, and patted him hard. You are very good. You are a real healer. In this way, I will take care of the bats, other animals, and the staff to take care of you. You can settle down here. Oh, no, you have to attend the training class of the Magic Council. Then go back and rent a house with enough space for 200 animals. Tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, or at most 3 days, the people and things will be there. Thank you so much, Elder. Gretel was really grateful. Elderwood waved his hand casually. What's the matter? It's not like the cult can't afford the money. Besides, if we make something, we can get the money back from the Magic Council. Ah, Gretel, who had just succeeded with nothing, was stunned for a moment, resigned to defeat. Okay, just wait and collect the things, what else do you need? It's like this. I still need some ways to isolate people from bats, since I know they are dangerous, I don't want to be infected myself. It's best if I can't bite or spit, and sick animals can't be attacked. Even if I sneeze or something, I won't breathe it in. Greet replied nervously. In fact, he really wanted to build a P4 laboratory, but he couldn't at least build a monkey version, such as a negative pressure airlock with an interlocking airlock, add an air pump, add filtration, and then mix the gas in the red zone with the fuel gas. Burn. If you don't have gas, you can consider hard burning, such as Gretel's modified version of burning hands. But you definitely can't mess with a rented house like this. If you buy a new house, regardless of whether you have sufficient financial resources, renovation is a big project. Forget it, let's ask if there are any isolation suits. You are thoughtful, Elderwood praised. He frowned and thought for a moment, what you said is really there. Wait a minute, I'll get it. He turned and entered. After a while, he brought a lot of dusty clothes over and gave them to Greet. Try it, is it suitable? Greet looked through them one by one. A thick black hat with a wide brim that almost covers his eyes. Thick cloth gloves, it feels like once you put them on, you can't do anything. Flat glass glasses, the quality of the glass is very questionable, seems to have some bubbles and cracks. The thick black coat has a rough texture, almost like canvas, and the surface is a little reflective, it looks like it's been coated with a layer of wax. Greet had a bad feeling. When he opened the coat, the essence of the outfit appeared before his eyes, confirming his suspicion. A bird with a beak and a face. The long beak made of silver has not been used for many years and has oxidized to black. Gretel tried his best to spread his thumb and index finger, but they were both a little shorter than that thing. There are several straps tied to the edge, which seem to be used to fix it on the head. Greet picked it up and looked inside. The mask was filled with something, completely decayed into debris, and it was impossible to tell what it was originally. If his knowledge from the past life is valid, there may be herbs such as mint leaves and rose petals, and if you are lucky, there may also be some spices, such as cloves, camphor, styrax, and ambergris. You might as well give me activated charcoal. Although activated charcoal is cheap and smells odorless, it is more reliable than these spices. Gretel was about to cry but had no tears left. Elderwood on the side was still saying, this is used to deal with the most ferocious plague. Originally, I didn't think it would be a problem, if you think it is necessary, just give it a try. I want latex gloves. I want protective clothing. I want N95 masks. Face screen. Goggles. Sorry, I no longer dislike the fact that the protective clothing issued by the hospital is too stuffy to wear. Every time I take it off, I end up with a bag of water. Gretel burst into tears. Thanks to @book friend 1611230201538544 for the reward of 100 starting coins. Thanks to @Red Comet Mars Boss for his book review, I copied it. Yesterday and today, 2 chapters in a row were locked up for review. One chapter was locked up for 15 minutes, and the other chapter was locked up for almost half an hour. What kind of luck do I have? Seek comfort. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 155. Gretel finally returned to the academy with his beak coat in his arms. There is no way, the wisdom of the ancients still makes sense, at least Greet does not have the ability to rub a medical protective mask with his hands, that thing cannot be repaired by sewing. Didn't you see that just like melt-blown cloth, Sinopec needs to roll up its sleeves and urgently deploy a production line? The 16-layer gauze mask, or Wulianda mask, Greet did not dare to rely on. This thing is good at preventing bacteria, such as Mr. Wu Lianda's time, but is it antivirus? Well, everyone has seen the bloody lesson. Later, when we were poor, we only had gauze masks. Now that we are rich, we also have more knowledge, and N95 masks are the best. Greet also had an idea about the magic path. He released a bubble technique and covered his forehead. This thing can theoretically isolate the exchange of air between the inside and outside, allowing the subject to only breathe the air in the bubble. In other words, if you are lucky, it can be used to isolate droplets. Then comes the experimental phase. Bernard picked up a glass of water mixed with ink and took a long sip. Then, take a deep breath and use all your lung capacity to aim at Gretel. Puff. Gretel Nordmark blinked, revealing two clear whites of his eyes. On one face, the rest of the face was spotted and stained with ink. Well, if you can't stand the spray, then you can't stand the sneeze either. The bubble technique is already the most reliable defensive magic that Gretel has figured out. So the conclusion is that Gretel can only choose between the beak suit and the gas mask. However, he weighed his manual ability, asked Bernard again, and voluntarily gave up the latter. The gas mask known as the pig nose is simple, and it is also a craft job. It has a cover body and a filter tank. It needs to fit the shape of your face and be sealed enough. It involves cobbler's craft, blacksmith's craft, and all kinds of messy crafts. Gretel can't handle it. So in the end, Gretel finally took back their ancestors with mourning for a full set of medical protective equipment. Then he changed his clothes, picked up his wallet, and went to the streets to find an experimental site and a place for the barbarians to stay. There is no way, the Magic Council provides accommodation for the trainees, but the followers do not have such treatment. In fact, even if someone dares to make a request, the Parliament can still ask. Why does a first-level magician accept followers? Oh, rely on family. Then continue looking for the family to gnaw at the old man, and don't think about asking the Parliament to help solve it. Gretel, the alternative, the poor man, Nordmark, had no choice but to open his legs and go to the streets to find a house. He stood at the entrance of the college, looked up at the top of the mountain, and then looked around. Looking southeast from the college, we can see the snow-capped mountains winding like dragons, with dark clouds covering the highest peaks. The core of the Magic Parliament, the magnificent magic towers, stand on the top of the peak, thrust straight into the clouds. Standing at the foot of the mountain, Gretel could see lightning flashing in the dark clouds and golden snakes dancing wildly. Every now and then, a thick bolt of lightning would light up and strike the tower. Which fellow Taoist is here to survive the tribulation? Gretel muttered something softly and turned his gaze down the mountain. This kind of environment with lightning and thunder all day long is obviously not suitable for other people except top magicians. So most of the magicians, followers, and ordinary people who serve the magicians gathered in the city at the foot of the mountain. It is said to be a city, but its shape is not square. The turquoise bay penetrates deeply into the land from the southwest, until it is blocked at the foot of the mountain, and spirals toward the northwest. The headquarters of the Magic Council is backed by mountains and faces the sea, spreading along the coastline, forming an inverted C-shaped town group. In such a town cluster, the consumption level can naturally be imagined. Greet walked along the street for half an hour, gardens, villas, restaurants decorated with granite pillars, 3- and 4-story luxury hotels, one after another. He even saw a theater. On the white marble wall at the entrance, a magician was drawing an advertisement for today's play. A handsome young man wearing a golden crown and a common girl wearing a gorgeous vertical skirt hugged each other and danced gracefully. The white lamb nestled at their feet. The boy and the girl looked at each other with happy smiles on their faces. The magician turned his back to Gretel and waved his hands. The stills had been drawn, and wherever he put his finger, the introduction to the play appeared in the blank space on the painting. The Prince and the Shepherdess, starring Edinson Linden, Matilda writes. Not to mention the magician's painting skills, the dyeing effect of the magic trick can only last for an hour. Disappearing and painting again every hour, this kind of advertising method, is so luxurious. Gretel was amazed. He walked from the street to the end of the street, skipping those villas, he couldn't afford to rent them anyway. Going further, bungalows began to appear one after another on the lakeside at the edge of the town. Greed knocked on the door one by one and asked 7 or 8 houses, and finally rented a small independent courtyard. The small yard is behind a wooden house with an attic. It was probably a warehouse originally, but the owner separated it and repaired it. The lighting is not good, but the space is quite large, totaling 40 to 50 square meters, and there is a courtyard of more than 20 square meters enclosed by a fence outside the door. There is a large wasteland beyond the house, and a little further away, shrubs and woods stretch towards the foot of the mountain. If Bernard wanted to stretch his arms and legs, there was plenty of room. Little priest, the landlady looked at the barbarian up and down with wary eyes, and then looked at Gretel again. After seeing the green leaves on his clothes and the oak staff in his hand, his face gradually softened. 1 gold coin per month, not including meals. You can keep animals in the house, but they have to be cleaned. If I smell a bit of a stink, get out immediately with both humans and animals. Gretel nodded. This yard is sufficient for housing people and raising small animals, but we can think of another way for large experimental animals. He asked tentatively. Then, can I build a few sheds outside the back door? Up to you. Make a deal. 3 days later, Elder Wood's disciple, Matthew, a 4th-level pastor, drove a group of pigs and sheep to the hut. Gretel slowly opened his mouth. How much do these cost? He asked tremblingly. Matthew shrugged nonchalantly. What money do you want? This is all borrowed, and you will pay it back when the time comes. Anyway, we are responsible for providing the feeding it for the owner, and we will pay compensation if you die. If the cult comes forward, they are not afraid of not getting the money. He held the oak staff and murmured a few words, and a circle of shrubs rose up behind the house, trapping all the pigs and sheep. Then began to move things from the carriage, a cage of rabbits, a cage of rabbits, another cage of rabbits, a cage of bats, a second cage of bats. Are you going to tell me that these rabbits are also borrowed? Of course not. Matthew looked at him strangely. Servant of the God of nature, how many rabbits do you want to borrow? Why don't you just catch them in the forest? Oh, there is also a cage of stoats here. You said last time that it would be best to bring a few stoats too. Monkeys, I really can't get it, sorry. Greed looked carefully and saw that the cages containing the animals were all made of rattan, tightly tangled, and there were no traces of cutting or binding. No need to ask, it probably didn't cost a penny to create the magic. Then, bat. The teacher caught it himself. Greed. I thought I was good enough to fight with nothing, but it turns out there is someone more powerful than me. Brother Matthew, you didn't spend a penny on so many experimental animals, right? Thanks to @Red Comet Mars for the reward of 10,000 starting coins. Thanks to @Uncle Flame for the 1,500 starting coins. Thanks @Clicking in random nicknames is easier than numbers. Reward with 500 starting coins. Thanks to @Lofsway for the 100 starting coins. Book Club Group Number 649136249. Everyone is welcome to chat together. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 156. In the next half month, in addition to attending regular lectures, Greed plunged into animal experiments. He, Matthew, Each has a beak protective suit. As for Bernard, he had no choice but to use bubble surgery and gauze mask to help with the heavy lifting. By the way, the barbarian's constitution is add 2. Or fortitude add 2. In short, Greed felt that the most that could cure his illness was to make Bernard sneeze. All in all, the safety of experimenters is reassuring for the time being. Gretel designed the process as carefully as possible, and with the help of Pastor Matthew, began to conduct animal experiments. All healthy animals are placed in one cage per cage. Pay attention to the placement and airflow direction, and try to prevent the air between cages from flowing to each other to avoid cross-infection of experimental animals. The friendship of Pastor Matthew prompted the creation of vine and grass-weaving cages, calling on the ground the earth rises to form walls and partition cages. 1/3 of the experimental animals were placed in each cage, and one bat was placed in each cage to observe whether the experimental animals would become infected if they lived with the bats. 1/3 of the experimental animals were treated in different ways, adding bat urine, bat guano, bat saliva, and dust wiped off the bat body to the feed and drinking water respectively, or using cotton swabs to dip the secretions from the bat's mouth. Rubbing the nasal cavity of experimental animals. The remaining 1/3, housed in normal cages, served as the control group. Feed every day, observe the animals every day, write records every day. Greet was really grateful to Pastor Matthew. I can weave cages and build earthen walls. I can catch sheep, pigs, rabbits, and bats with perfect accuracy. I can never make mistakes when adding food and water. I can clean the animal cages without getting too dirty, and moving the feed without getting too hard. Without his help, this animal experiment would really not be possible for a day. Greet himself tried to catch a rabbit once. He put his hand into the cage and fished for it for a minute, but he just couldn't catch it. In the end, he was kicked by a rabbit on the back of his hand. If he hadn't withdrawn his hand quickly, he might have broken his fingers. Not to mention the stoats that are as fast as lightning, the goats that can gore people, and the black pigs that can weigh at least 100 kilograms. Gretel only glanced at it and gave up the idea of doing anything. He stood aside and directed Pastor Matthew, "Grab this rabbit. Turn it upside down. Measure the temperature. Insert the thermometer. Hey, don't put it in your mouth, I only have one thermometer, don't let it chew it. The mercury poisonous. Then where should I insert it?" Greet stared into Pastor Matthew's eyes under the beak mask, tightened her lips, and resolutely refused to speak. And it's not because of the teacher's instructions that Pastor Matthew works hard without complaint. In fact, every time he does something, he has countless questions to ask. Why do we need to prepare so many kinds of animals? Because we don't know what kind of infection bats can infect. Greet looked at the cage with a look full of pity. So many kinds? I thought I was too little prepared. In theory, mice, rabbits, dogs, pigeons, as well as pigs, horses, and sheep known to be intermediate hosts must be prepared. If possible, it would be better to have civets and pangolins, well, forget about the latter, to protect animals. Why feed them the bats with, different stuff? Because we need to determine the transmission route. Fecal-oral transmission, droplet transmission, and body fluid transmission, different routes require different defense methods. In terms of disease prevention, Greet has always shared endless knowledge. For example, if you get sick by breathing in its sneezes, you should cover your mouth and nose like we do. If you eat dirty things into your mouth, you must wash your hands before eating. Then why do we need to prepare more than 20 of each type? Because animal experiments are about betting on probability, betting on possibility. There are so many animals, and if each method and each type of bat is given a point, there won't be much left. 20 is too much. The little friend in the pharmacy field next door told me that whenever a new drug is tested, the first phase of clinical testing will measure half of the lethal dose, and no matter what, it will start with dozens or hundreds. Note that there are dozens or hundreds of white mice, dozens or hundreds of pigeons, rhesus monkeys. Oh, rhesus monkeys are precious. All other experimental animals are dead. Relatively harmless drugs are screened out and then tested on rhesus monkeys. Even when he was studying in his previous life, in order to let clinical medicine students experience it and conduct a 50% lethal dose experiment, a class would have to be divided into 8 groups, with 6 to 8 mice in each group. Do the math, no matter what, you need 48 to see if it's good or bad. Unlike here, there are only 2 or 3 animals of the same species for each transmission route and each type of bat. The odds were so low that he was frightened. Whether it can produce results or not, I feel it is purely a matter of character. In other words, could it be possible to successfully issue an early warning? Perhaps the national destiny of the Magic Council is at play? Gretel answered without hesitation, and Pastor Matthew kept these unknown knowledge in his heart one by one. Even if God knows what it can be used for, if others are willing to share it generously, it is worth his or her efforts to help. Why do you have to have half male and half female? We have been looking for boars and rams for a long time. Especially boars. Many of the young boars were killed and eaten, and the breeding pigs were not so easy to borrow. They were just a bag of tears. Finally, as a last resort, I went to catch a group of wild boars in the woods. Because of different diseases, the probability of illness in male and female individuals may not be the same. Alas, poor Gretel looked around the animal laboratory and shed a handful of tears of sympathy for himself in his heart. According to the orthodox experimental design method, doubling the number of experimental animals may not be enough, but he could hardly afford to support him at this point. Even if you can afford it, there are no manpower to take care of it. If there are people to take care of it, there are not that many manpower to take care of the animals one by one and measure their body temperature. Alas, no wonder those who make new drugs are big companies. When his status rises in the future, he must ask the Magic Council for a research team to help him raise experimental animals. Greet gave himself another reason to work hard to upgrade. Holding a notebook, Pastor Matthew measured the animal's temperature once, and he made a note next to it. Hair number 12, body temperature is 39 degrees, well, let's order 39.2 degrees. The food intake is normal, the spirit is normal, the defecation is normal, there are no abnormal secretions from the eyes, nose, and mouth, and the health is good. I told you this. Why do we need to measure the rabbit if it's normal? Then you have to measure it. Besides, how can you guarantee that it's definitely normal? I can communicate with it. Even the servants of the God of nature can do it, right? You can't. Well. Greet, who is seriously partial to science, sneaks in, and Nordmark, except for healing, does not know any other skills of the God of nature priest. There will be another update in 5 minutes. Thanks to @Lofsweu, @Bookfriend 2021030819044523 for the reward of 100 starting coins. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, please recommend votes. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 157. In fact, Gretel understood Pastor Matthew's mood very well. If it were him who was responsible for the work, he wouldn't want to take the temperatures of so many animals, one at a time. After all, this is too much work. Wearing a black beak suit, a big black hat, and flat glasses, you have to take off your gloves, wash your hands, and disinfect the thermometer every time you take a measurement. Fortunately, it's winter. If it were summer and he was working hard in a suit like this, Gretel felt that he would suffer from heat stroke on the spot just by thinking about it. Gretel also wanted to help, but firstly, the force value was not enough, and secondly, there is only one thermometer in total. Gretel could only watch from the side, worried again and again. Be careful. Don't break it. Be careful. Don't let the mercury leak. The animals will be poisoned. I know, I haven't finished disinfecting it yet, you have to take your time. The glass tube will explode if you put it directly on the fire. You should wash your hands first. Can't I just wash my hands? After being asked to wash his hands for the 35th time, Pastor Matthew finally couldn't bear it anymore. Wash your hands after measuring them, and wash your hands after measuring them. Look at my hands, the skin is bulging, and they will crack if I wash them again. Greet looked at him sadly and pointed to the cardboard box next to him. Pastor Matthew's anger immediately dropped a little. In the paper box, Gretel prepared casing gloves in advance, 12,345, a total of 40 or 50 pairs, thrown there in a mess. It was all for him to measure one animal, throw away a pair, measure another, throw away a pair. Greet was extremely well prepared. Looking at the amount, it seemed like he had plundered all the casings he could find. Can't we just change it? No, unless you want cross-infection between experimental animals, the test results will be inaccurate. Gretel ruthlessly rejected Pastor Matthew. Changing gloves and washing hands are nothing. You must know that in emergency surgery, you have to wash your hands once when handling a patient, and wash your hands again when handling another patient. If you don't want to wash your hands, just rub it with alcohol-free gel, that stuff isn't much better. When there are many patients, she can rub them hundreds of times a day. The little nurse's pink and tender hands will be dry one day, the skin will break out in 2 days, and there will be cracks in 3 days. Did they say anything? T. Brother Matthew, please bear with me for a while. I'll go buy hand ointment after you finish your work. Greet used his best affinity and tried to persuade. We are doing medical-related experiments, and the ultimate goal is to save people. The more we abide by the experimental rules, the more accurate the results will be, and the more likely it is to help more people. So, Brother Matthew, please bear with me a little longer and look back. I will write your name as the first author. Pastor Matthew burst out laughing. I'm a priest. What's the use of being listed as the first author on the Magic Council's paper? No matter how the author's name is listed, the paper must be written. Fortunately for Greet, the incubation period of this new disease was not too long, so he didn't have to wait too long. Animals began to fall ill after 5 or 6 days. Gretel took notes while measuring, and more than half a month later, news from Elderwood also came through. So, when the quiz at the end of the month was over and the students' research results were tested, Gretel's paper was sent to the desk of the disciple who had left the homework together with the homework of the students in the training class. Master Harvey looked at the pile of student homework in front of him and his face turned green. Oh my God, what kind of stuff can a level 1 mage write? The format of the paper is half correct, and the abstract often makes no sense. As for the keywords, it would be good if half of them are relevant. The teacher is too lazy to correct the homework, and he doesn't want to waste time with this thing. And there are a lot of articles in this issue, 70 or 80 students submitted more than 20 papers. Considering that joint writing is allowed in the training class, at least half of the students have jumped on this thing, right? He couldn't even buy a bat, he was only halfway through the previous research. Master Harvey opened the first chapter dejectedly. Imitation of the flying posture of bats to improve the feather falling technique is very good, it is about improving magic. He casually touched a bat wing and tried it according to the description in the paper. Additional casting materials have been added, and the magic power consumption has not been reduced, nor has the landing speed increased or decreased. He wrote a note at the end of the paper. It is recommended that the student lay a solid foundation in magic research, or choose another research direction. I threw it aside and opened the second chapter. Comparative study of 3 different bats as echo magic materials. This is not that ambitious, but the conclusion, Master Harvey turned to the second to last page and scanned the lines at a glance. To sum up, the difference in bat types does not affect its effect as an echo magic material. So you have been researching for a long time, but you are lonely. Master Harvey sneezed, picked up the red pen, and drew out this conclusion without even bothering to write any more comments. The third article, the fourth article. After reading 13 or 4 papers in one breath, Master Harvey's eyes were dazzled and he felt that he no longer recognized the word bat. He casually threw away another paper and picked up the next paper. Study of a disease caused by close contact with bats. What? Studying diseases? Researching diseases is the job of healers. Why did you hand it over to the training class of the Magic Council? Or is there a necromancer among the students this time? I don't remember that. Master Harvey's instinct was to throw the paper away. However, when I glanced at it, I happened to see the following summary. Recently, some patients with similar symptoms have appeared among adventurers who capture bats. We conducted extensive surveys of people who come into contact with bats and conducted animal experiments at the same time, confirming that bats may carry some unknown toxins that can cause diseases in animals and humans. The disease is characterized by fever, headache, myalgia, vomiting and sore throat, which may be followed by dizziness, drowsiness, confusion. Master Harvey was stunned. He suddenly remembered that he had a slight fever a few days ago and his throat hurt a little. At that time, I thought I had caught a cold. If it was because of studying bats, how many magicians had fallen victim to it? How many magicians will have serious consequences? He looked at it carefully. In the paper in hand, many research methods were unfamiliar to him, including a lot of regulations on animal experiments. However, Master Harvey can at least see. The person who wrote this paper put a lot of effort into designing this experiment, making it as detailed and precise as possible, and eliminating all interference. To sum up, we can draw a preliminary conclusion: close contact with bat saliva and excrement, inhalation into the nasal cavity or contamination during eating, may cause illness. For this reason, it is recommended to wear a mask when studying bats, and be sure to cover your hands and face after the experiment. Do not let bat products come into contact with food. The more Master Harvey looked, the more serious he became. Finally, he knocked on the teacher's door with Greet's paper. Book Club Group Number, 649136249. Everyone is welcome to chat together. Continue to ask for subscriptions, monthly votes, recommendation votes, and book reviews. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 158. The Magic Council's training courses started in mid-July and ended temporarily on December 21st, the New Year's holiday. Starting from the 22nd, students can happily eat, drink, have fun, and wander around the Magic Council headquarters. After the New Year, I will come back and continue the next half of the course. Naturally, December 21st became the day when the training class issued transcripts. Amanda Tedder, C+. A red-haired girl walked up to the podium dejectedly and took the transcript and paper from the teaching assistant. She was playing a little crazy during this period. After 5 months, her mental power had not increased by more than 30% from level 1 to level 2, and the highest score she could get on both papers was B-. Although it is sad to receive such a rating, it is not completely unexpected. Christian Price, B-. A blond boy came up to the stage to receive documents. Scanning the cover of the paper, my brows immediately jumped. How is this possible? That article, The Impact of Different Parts of Bats as Spellcasting Materials on Echo Magic, got only a B rating. He originally thought he could get an A. Sorry, I'm not having a good time this new year. Korean Franz, B+. One by one, the names were announced from the teaching assistant's mouth, and the students stepped forward to receive their papers, and then left the podium in disgrace. The grading of this training class is quite strict. There are only 3 A's, 6 or 7 B and S in the whole class of 70 or 80 people, and the rest are B and below. A group of boys and girls who were selected and sent here with the titles of genius and elite looked at each other. All of them had ugly expressions. Several students who got C were frightened and beat their chests frequently. Not bad, not bad, I almost got D. When D, I will have to interrupt my studies and be sent home. The teaching assistant was unselfish and read the list one by one, finally reading the last one. Gretel Nordmark, What? No. Why not? There was a slight commotion in the classroom. The teaching assistant took off his monocle, wiped it, put it back on, and looked at it again. At the end of the form in his hand, there is still no score next to Gretel's name, replaced by a line of small words. Essay score to be determined. The teaching assistant read it aloud. Gretel went up to the stage to get his report card. Along the way, the boys and girls whispered to each other and talked about it. No, none of this. It's been almost 10 days since the paper was handed in. I remember he just came last month. Yes, I remember it too. Perhaps the paper was too poor and was withheld. Maybe it wasn't written at all. Gretel returned to his seat with strange looks on his face. The teaching assistant knocked on the podium and summed up with a smile. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your New Year's holiday. By the way, before the holiday, you can go to the college library and exchange your grades for some magic. The students ran away. It's rare to have so many exchange opportunities open at one time. The scrolls in the library's reserve are limited. First come, first served. Last comers can only pick up what others have left behind. Gretel was sitting in the last row and shrank into the seat. The table was immediately hit several times, one after another. These mages are usually all delicate, but now they didn't pause or cry out in pain. After hitting the table, they turned around and ran towards the back door. With a bang, Greet watched helplessly as the two mages huddled together and got stuck at the back door. He waited until the classroom was clear, then slowly picked up his skull bag and walked out slowly. There is a small library at Bridge Magic Academy. Students are not allowed to borrow books. They can only read in the library, and they can only read basic and principal books. As for wanting to learn a certain magic, sorry, you can either buy it with gold coins, or exchange it with the contribution points from the Magic Council. The library was crowded at the moment. Although the 70 or 80 students were standing in a long queue, they couldn't help but jostle and push each other, trying to get closer. Gretel passed them towards the reading area, and heard the administrator behind him keep answering. C+. Madam, you can redeem 2 level 0 magics. Please check the list yourself. B-. 1 level 1 magic, 1 level 0 magic. A-. Sir, 2 level 1 magics and 1 level 0 magic. The borrowing time for teaching scrolls is 10 days, oh, let me see, the holiday is coming soon. You can borrow it until the end of the New Year holiday. So I missed a grading opportunity, which is equivalent to missing an opportunity to learn magic for free. Gretel turned his feet and returned to the borrowing window. In the library on the other side, a red-haired lady was reading a book. Greet asked her with a smile. Excuse me, what are the conditions for borrowing magic? See for yourself. The lady pointed to the wall without raising her head. A flash of light flew out from her bright red crotch, and Greet turned around and quickly scanned the price list on the wall. For level 0 magic, the borrowing fee for teaching scrolls is 100 gold coins, or 100 contribution points. For level 1 magic, the borrowing fee for teaching scrolls is 502,000 gold coins, or an equivalent amount of contribution points. Level 2 magic. The borrowing period is 10 days. If there is any damage, Compensation will be made according to the price. Gretel. I feel like I missed 100 million, no, I missed several thousand gold coins. Gretel raised his neck slightly and froze in front of the price list for a long time. Then he turned around, lowered his head, and shuffled away. Alas, there is so much magic in front of you, you can only look at it but not learn it. In Heartland City's Mage Tower, half of the level 0 magics are only listed by name, and there are no teaching scrolls to learn. There are only 1/3 of the level 1 magics, and most of the level 2 magics are definitely missing. If you want to learn other things, you must either exchange them privately among magicians, or go to the Magic Council to buy them with money. Who is responsible for grading his paper? Why did everyone else's scores come out but not his? During this New Year holiday, I could have learned several new magic spells. Gret Nordmark. Suddenly a voice sounded at the door. Gretel turned his head, turned around, and turned towards the door with his classmates. A 5th level mage in red robe hurried in, holding a piece of paper and looking around the crowd. Who is Gretel Nordmark? Is it you? Follow me. What? The Archmage wants to see you. There was a sudden silence. Under the astonished gazes of his classmates, Gret was carried out of the library by the red-robed mage and thrown onto a black horse. From the height to the saddle to the eyes and posture, the black horse looks very standard. At first glance, it is the product of summoning mount. The red-robed mage flicked the reins, and the 2 horses galloped through the academy and across the streets. We walked higher and higher, closer and closer to the foothills, and soon we stopped in front of a long building with a curved roof. Gretel looked at the ceiling doubtfully. The style is so familiar, it always feels like a train platform. Does the technology tree here have a train? When did you get it? Obviously all physics professions use carriages, but magicians like to summon mounts. Then Gret really saw a train, or something that looked like a train. The length is not very good. Compared with the emus in the previous life, even the green leather car is a bit shorter than the big one, and the carriage is also much narrower. But the carriage was really sliding on the rails, clanging, 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 and gradually rising up the foothills. Where are we going? Gret asked curiously. The red-robed mage looked matter-of-factly. Go up to the magic tower. The archmage is very busy, will he come down to see you? Thanks to Etlofsway for the 100 starting coins. Book Club Group Number, 649136249. Everyone is welcome to chat together. Continue to ask for subscriptions, monthly votes, recommendation votes, and book reviews. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 159. Gretel has been at the Magic Council headquarters for more than a month, and this is the first time she has the opportunity to go up the mountain and see the core group of magic towers. The small train clanked and clanked all the way up the track. The light outside the train window dimmed little by little as the height increased. Water mist gradually filled the glass windows. Gret stretched out his hand and wiped it wildly, then looked out through the window and found that the train had entered the fog, and the visibility outside was less than 20 meters. Further up, the rain fell continuously, hitting dots on the car windows, which soon became lines of water. I didn't bring an umbrella. Gret looked at the red-robed mage for help. High-level wizards may have magical protection, such as Master Carlyle. Gret saw that when he walked out, the rain naturally drained away from him. But he is a great mage, and a level 1 mage like him has no such ability. Not to mention whether you might catch a cold or pneumonia if you get wet in the middle of winter, it would be too embarrassing to go see the archmage all wet. Don't worry, you won't get wet, red-robed mage Harvey laughed. Gret felt a little relieved, thinking that the rain would stop when they reached the top of the mountain. The rain really stopped, but a violent blizzard. Before the car even stopped, the howling wind was blowing snowflakes, and the car windows were already banging. The glass windows were shaking back and forth in the window frames, and even the train car itself had a suspicious shaking feeling. Gretel. How strong is this wind? Level 7? 8th grade. Isn't it going up to level 9? If it is strengthened again, I no longer have to worry about whether I will get wet, but I will have to worry about whether I can walk. The red-robed mage opposite still smiled and said nothing. The train crawled up a short distance into level ground. After traveling another 20 or 30 meters, there was a sudden silence outside the carriage, the wind slowed down, and the blizzard disappeared without a trace, as if we had entered another world. Gretel tried to look back. No walls, no glass, no visible entity. However, the wind and snow were indeed blocked, whirling and whistling 20 or 30 meters behind, weaving into a white barrier. Welcome to Igor Peak. Master Harvey kept admiring Greet's shocked expression until the train stopped, then he smiled and pointed forward. What you see is the defense system of the Mage Tower Group, the Igor Mystery Lock. The top of Igor Peak has lightning and thunder all year round, and there are violent storms and snow in winter, so part of the Mystery Lock is opened as usual. On the one hand, it regulates the climate, on the other hand, you can also actively draw power from the storm. This is a large-scale active weather defense system. Also comes with active energy absorption. Even the high-tech in previous lives couldn't do it. Greet sighed sincerely. So in this alien world, the technology may not be that backward, it may just be that the technology tree is crooked. Master Harvey allowed Greet to turn his head vigorously and admired the wonder of the lock for a while before passing over a small sign. He motioned for Gretel to hang it on his wrist. This is a temporary pass inside the mystery lock. You have not authenticated it in the Tower of Babel, oh, the main mage tower in it, so hang this to make it easier to walk. Saying that, he stepped out of the carriage first. A ray of light immediately shot down from the sky and shone on the two of them. In Gretel's hand, the small round card buzzed slightly, and his vision immediately became clear. The top of Eagle Peak is not sharp and tall, but a continuous plateau. In the center of the platform stood a majestic mage tower, with its upper half inserted deeply into the clouds, and vague lightning dancing around the tower. Surrounding the main tower are a group of mage towers of different shapes, some tall, some short, some fat, some thin. There is also a crooked one poking there, with an angle larger than the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Looking at it, Greet was really worried that it would fall to the bottom of the cliff. Master Harvey pointed to a pyramid-shaped one and introduced it to him. That's from the necromancy school. Gretel. Can I guess there is an inverted pyramid below? But he didn't have time to explore them one by one. Master Harvey led him straight forward and entered the right side of the main tower, a mage tower with slender and smooth lines and a full waist. As he walked, he introduced. The teacher attaches great importance to your paper on bats and submitted it to the review committee for review. The review committee collected the recent situation and received a letter from Master Wood, so they asked you to come up and ask about the situation. With that said, he stepped into the mage tower. The auxiliary tower on the right is a bright light blue from the wall to the ground, like the color of water waves. The interior of the wall changes profoundly, and at a glance, it seems that there are ripples rolling continuously. Gretel was about to take a closer look when Master Harvey had already pulled him into a small semicircular room. He reached out and touched the wall, pointed at a translucent black panel at shoulder height and whispered, "Floor 35, thank you." "Floor 35, please wait," a soft female voice replied. Gretel's feet sank, and numbers began to flash on the black panel, 1, 2, 3, 10, 11. Voice-activated elevator? Gretel was a little surprised. Master Harvey observed his words and introduced him. We can just stand here. The tower spirit will control this room and raise it to the 35th floor. When we come down later, we will also speak to the tower spirit here. I'm not surprised about voice-controlled elevators, I'm surprised that you have voice-controlled elevators here, Gretel complained silently. They were received by the Archmage on the 35th floor. The person who came forward to inquire was the one who taught the sonic course, Master Kiffer, Master Harvey's teacher. He called Greet forward, turned the paper in his hand to the last page, pointed to a few lines of words and asked him. Gret Nordmark? Your paper says that the experimental conditions are limited and the results may not be accurate. So, what conditions do you need to ensure accuracy? Animal types, quantity, care staff, experimental environment, equipment. Greet answered very fluently. Experimental animals must at least be mice, rabbits, pigs, sheep, horses, if possible, plus pigeons and dogs, and preferably monkeys. Seek healthy adults, half male and female, based on 100 times the number of bat species. Quantity configuration. At least 3 to 5 species of bats, manpower, houses, experimental equipment. I've long wanted the lion to open his mouth. God knows that when he asked Elderwood for help, the experimental conditions were deleted again and again, reduced again and again, until he couldn't cut anymore, and if he cut again, nothing could be done. Just like the school building of Southwest Associated University, it was changed from 3 floors to 2 floors, from 2 floors to 1-story house, from brick walls to adobe walls, from green tile roof to thatched roof. If these conditions were given to you, could you achieve the same result? Master Kiffer listened patiently and then asked. Gretel immediately shook his head. No, I can only say that the more complete the experimental conditions are, the greater the probability of producing results. But if you do it according to your conditions, it will cost a lot. Master Kiffer's eyes flashed with a smile. If you can't guarantee the results, what if the Magic Council doesn't agree to redo it? I've tried my best, Greet replied without hesitation. I gave the forewarning and handed in the thesis. Do you want me to make the decision for the Magic Council as to whether to spend money and whether to conduct repeated experiments? If the patient refuses to pay or undergo an examination, we can't do it. Anyway, I have confirmed its transmission route. If the council refuses to issue a warning, I will wear a mask every day, try to maintain social distance, and brush myself with healing spells every day. You just need to give me a grade for this assignment. Everything else is fine with me, he said calmly. Master Kiffer's smile deepened. Then I'll take it as your consent. Without waiting for Greet to answer, he touched a pen and scribbled 2 lines of words on the paper. Passed it to Master Harvey. You sort out the experimental conditions Gretel wants, make an evaluation, and apply to the Magic Council for emergency project approval. After the application is approved, let him preside over it and conduct repeated experiments. Gretel, hey. What did I promise? I didn't agree to anything. Repeat the experiment and do it yourself. I still have a lot to study, a lot of magic to learn, meditate, and level up. Archmages are cunning and cunning. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 160. Greet still agreed to host the repeated experiment. There is no way, the Magic Council has given too much. Last semester's grade was directly A+, allowing him to redeem 2 level 1 magics and 3 level 0 magics, and the borrowing time was 20 days. Considering that it takes time for him to conduct repeated experiments, these redemption rights can be exercised any day in the next semester. After the repeated experiment, all consumables, experimental animals, and experimental equipment will belong to Greet. If it can be proven that bats can indeed spread diseases, the laboratory that put forward many design requirements can also give it to him. The paper I wrote before is recommended for publication in Ordinary Magician Monthly. Of course, if Greet is willing to wait for the subsequent repeated experiments to produce results, the results of the two experiments can be combined and directly recommended to arcane or magic. Naturally, the rewards related to publishing papers will definitely not be less. After the training course, Gretel is allowed to stay at Bridge Magic Academy for 3 more months and freely read the books in the academy, excluding, of course, magic that requires money or contribution points. The teacher really values you. Master Harvey took the teacher's note and went to run errands to complete the formalities. As he ran, he sighed to Greet. Presiding a project independently, I only have this authority after I was promoted to level 5 this year. There are only 2 people in my team, which is much less than you. Greet smiled back at him. Thank you very much for your care, Master Harvey, he said softly and quickly. With all due respect, could you please join my experimental group? We can share the first author. You know, this experiment requires there are so many people, I'm afraid I won't be able to hold them down. The red-robed mage's heart skipped a beat. He hesitated for a moment and shook his head. No need, this experiment is not my research direction. If it's convenient, I can send an apprentice over to work under your team. You can take care of the authorship rights. You can also give it to a third author. Gretel was able to repeat the experiment again with the resources of the Magic Council. During the entire New Year holiday, from December 21 to January 10 of the following year, he was completely involved in the experiment. While others were shopping, he was drawing the design of the monkey version of the P4 laboratory. While others were celebrating the New Year, he ordered a group of deistic priests to drive rabbits, weasels, pigs, sheep, and horses into the laboratory. While others were holding new magic scrolls to study, he held the rabbits in one hand and held a thermometer in the other, taking the temperatures of the rabbits one by one. When others were visiting the college library, he had a pile of experimental records on his left and a pile of medical records obtained from elderwood on his right. He was writing the paper so loudly that his tongue was about to stick out. On January 11, the training class resumed. Gretel's seat was empty, with no one around. On January 12, Greet still didn't show up. On January 13, Greet continued to take leave. However, his disappearance did not attract much attention. Greet was busy with his own projects. He always came to class and left after class. He never went to the library with his classmates, let alone formed a group with others to study projects. You don't talk in class, you leave at the end of get out of class, and during recess, oh, the teachers in the training class all lectured in one breath, and there was no recess. For a long time, the opinions of most students in the training class towards him kept jumping between "is there such a person in our class?" and "oh, that one who came 3 months late. By the way, now I have to add another one, the one who had no grades last semester." Of course, he wasn't the only one who missed class. Some teachers turn a blind eye to students' absence from class, some will only scold the children of acquaintances, and some are extremely strict and will not allow anyone to miss class without any reason. On January 15, Edgar, the necromancer who came to class, stood on the podium and watched with a cold face as the assistant teacher held the booklet and called the names one by one. Amanda Tedder. Arrive. Christian Price. Arrive. Corian Franz. Arrive. Pedro Meyer. Arrive. Anthony Valentine. Anthony Valentine. Forget it until it arrives. Necromancer Edgar interrupted the assistant teacher's words, his tone was flat, and there was no emotion or anger. Next. Yes. Jessica Atkinson. Arrive. After the roll call was completed, 15 of the 80 students were absent from class, naturally, Gretel was included. Master Edgar looked at the teaching assistant with a stern look. Those who have never asked for leave will have their grades lowered by 1 grade. Classes will begin now. Sorry, we're late. A group of boys and girls rushed to the door. The first 2 floors and the back 2 floors blocked the classroom door tightly. The leader, the blond boy, had some redness on his cheekbones and corners of his eyes, and his eyelids were swollen. He was obviously still hungover. As soon as he arrived at the door, he bowed deeply. "Your Majesty the Archmage, I'm very sorry. I'm a little late." "You can still be late for class in the academy," Master Edgar interrupted. "You can be late for a while even if you are so close. When you go to the battlefield, aren't you going to be late for a whole day? Stand outside." "But Master, I asked for leave. I was late because I broke through level 2. "Of course I know you took 10 days off." Master Edgar's thin face was cold and cold, without any warmth. "I also know that you broke through level 2 yesterday. After you broke through, you went drinking with a group of people to celebrate. Don't deny it, I saw you outside the bar. What if it breaks through level 2? You are all elites selected from each county. The training class has been open for half a year, and the Archmage from each school has taken turns giving lectures for half a year. Isn't it natural for you to break through the level? Why don't you go out and drink for this? And even brought a group of people to drink together. How dare you miss class? If these results can satisfy you, you should not come to the training class and give your place to someone with more potential." Wizard Edgar looked as thin as a skeleton, but his lung capacity was really amazing. He cursed for 5 minutes without stopping. Next to the necromancer, a dark golden skeleton was holding a stack of thick paper, its upper and lower jaws clicking, whether it was laughing or swearing. Anthony was so scolded that he couldn't hold his head up. Behind him, a group of teenagers and girls who were going out to drink and celebrate all bowed their heads. Some people had already quietly moved to the edge of the wall and stood close to it. Master Edgar cursed loudly and was about to start teaching when another person came running to the door. "Your Majesty the Archmage, I'm very sorry. I'm late." "Which one are you?" Master Edgar had already picked up the red pen and looked at the roll call, ready to put a cross on the name of the person coming. The visitor bowed deeply. "Gretel Nordmark." "I'm so sorry." The Archmage paused with his pen. He raised his head and looked at Greet, from the flattened hair on his forehead, pressed by the surgical cap, to the old and faded mage robe, the result of daily cleaning, to the leather boots under his feet. Soil. The more he looked at it, the kinder his expression became, and finally he waved his hand and pointed to the inside of the classroom. "Be careful not to be late next time. Come in and listen to the class." "Why can he come in and listen?" Behind Anthony, a younger boy shouted unconvinced. Anthony immediately gave him an elbow, and the young man shut up in pain, still looking miserable. Before and after, the boys and girls who were late and were punished to stand, also looked at Gretel. "You touch me, I will hump you." Greet passed through them with strange looks and walked quickly to his seat. When I was almost in my seat, I heard someone whisper from behind. "Aren't they all late?" Greet sat down in his seat. Before the stationery was spread out, a large piece of paper was already spinning like a goddess scattering flowers, and landed accurately on everyone's desk. Gretel lowered his head to look, and Master Edgar's hoarse voice sounded at exactly this moment. "Today we are going to talk about a new paper. Necromantic Department, Plague Direction. It just passed the review meeting yesterday and will be published in the new issue of Arcana. Author, Gretel Nordmark.